Wow, there's a lot going on.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Well, I think you could probably say that most nights, right? You know, we call it my state of mind for a reason. I'm a little scattered today with some of the stuff that happens to be in the news, but I'm glad to have a real standout guest who can give us, she has already set a precedent here to be pretty direct, no nonsense, and you know, I always take something away. It is Black History Month still as we're rolling out here in February, and we've got a local controversy in the legislature that I think could use a little bit of perspective, so hang in there for that. Great to have you aboard. Thanks for tuning in on this Ash Wednesday. Couple of things in the news. Let's talk about the debate, obviously, last night first. It's hard to figure out who won the debate. I think you can do a calculation as to who lost the debate. Here's what the network had.
6 of the 7 candidates who participated in last night's presidential debate spoke at a civil rights prayer breakfast. They are courting black voters here in South Carolina, but former Vice President Joe Biden has staked his campaign on the majority of black voters choosing him.
I will win South Carolina.
Wednesday morning, he won the endorsement of U.S. Representative James Clyburn from South Carolina, the highest-ranking black member of Congress.
I'm voting for Joe Biden.
But it's Senator Bernie Sanders who's heading into South Carolina's primary with the most momentum. In last night's debate, the national frontrunner was repeatedly attacked over his ideas, his record, and his electability.
Bernie and I agree on a lot of things, but I think I would make a better president than Bernie.
I do not think that this is the best person to lead the ticket.
I am not looking forward to a scenario where it comes down to Donald Trump with his nostalgia for the social order of the 1950s and Bernie Sanders with a nostalgia for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
Sanders argued his campaign has a grassroots movement behind him that can lead Democrats to victory.
Do we think health care for all, Pete, is some kind of radical communist idea? Do we think raising taxes on billionaires is a radical idea?
CBS News poll after the debate, 45% of viewers said they were impressed with Sanders and he made the best case he can beat President Trump. For his part, Sanders went after former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who will be on the ballot for the first time next week.
The economy is doing really great for people like Mr. Bloomberg and other billionaires.
South Carolina voters head to the polls Saturday. 14 states hold contests next Tuesday.
The fascinating thing about this is that the South Carolina pre-debate is the debate for Super Tuesday. There are no more debates until Super Tuesday, and so this was a much bigger impact on the country and on the chances to win the Democratic nomination. I think Michael Bloomberg has shown that he's just really not up to the task. Let's put it this way, the amount of money he's invested does not measure up to his capabilities on that debate stage, which is if he continues to buy his way through a growth in the polls, an indicator that the less he talks, the better off he is. I'm not sure that's very good for democracy. At the same time, you know, Amy Klobuchar looks like she is probably going to get squeezed out of this thing sooner or later, which I think is the heartbreak of all this, because she may very well be the best candidate. And if Tom Steyer has another 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars he wants to blow on something, maybe he can dedicate it to the next story, which is the coronavirus, because quite frankly, his candidacy is sick. He's all done. Smoke them if you got them, if you got that dough, right? Coronavirus headline here. This is tricky now. You're watching this at 7:30 and or midnight. The president reportedly, we're here at 1:30 in the afternoon. The president reportedly was going to speak at 6 o'clock, so you have seen perhaps what he has said about this. I'm more concerned with the president's credibility. For a guy who's had a real hard time with the truth and people giving him a big long break on that, now we come to a place where what he says is going to be tested not for politics, but for public safety and for health. And we've always wondered, was there going to be a time here when the president may not be up to the task? His early remarks on the coronavirus versus what he may have said this evening probably won't measure up. and the CDC and he are not necessarily on the same page, and consistency of message, transparency, and the truth are what matter here. Stay tuned, right? The revenue tax came up last night. This is something that the progressive movement in Rhode Island has been pounding away at. We got a headline here and a little bit of sound from the Statehouse last night. I'll explain it.
Often follow up the question where will we get the money for that? This is a way that we can provide that change, growth, and development for those communities that are often taken away when we need more money for something else.
By bringing that equity to our tax structure, we bring tax relief to 99% of the taxpayers in the state of Rhode Island.
The good senator and I are going to have to talk about that on your behalf, because I'm not exactly sure how that works. Here's the thing. If you want to raise taxes on the rich, meaning people over $475,000 a year, which I guess is the 1% quotient here in the state, I'm open to the tactic. Here's the thing. I want to know what the motive is. What are we trying to accomplish? There's a secondary proposal that assesses the tax specifically for education reasons, and there might be a little bit more of a breakdown there. Look, you can't get money from a rock. I mean, you can't get water from a rock, right? So if we're that tapped out and we've got educational goals here that we need to pursue and accomplish, vis-a-vis, say, the city of Providence and its challenges, then we all ought to be open to the investment we're already all in on. But if this is just a, hey, we need more money, let's hit the rich because that's the momentum of progressive politics, no good. NG. So this is going to require a lot of conversation, and I promise you that we'll get on that as we go. Headline, I guess, Black History Month. I don't think we've spent enough time on it. At the same time, I'm not sure whether that in and of itself is kind of a, for lack of a better term, a token sentiment. I'll get set straight real quick here by Dr. Françoise Hamlin, who is no nonsense on this kind of stuff. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
What are you thinking about the designation of the month this year?
Well, it's the same month every year.
No, but I mean its application to the real world this year.
This year, I don't know. I mean, I think you know, most applications of Black History Month always just sit with the history more than sort of thinking about where we are right now, because there's enough going on that does that on a regular basis. So the kind of events I'm going to or have been to or been a part of are looking at sort of at historical legacies of perhaps what we're seeing now and doing that kind of work. But you know, for me on a daily basis, this is what I do all year round. Right. So it means a little less to me in that sense.
Because you live it.
I live it and I teach it. This is what I do for a living. Sort of, you know, I teach Black history, I teach US history. So with that comes all of these questions that bubble up in February, are questions that I ask my students and I write about all year round.
Should we have a Black History Month?
Yes, definitely.
Because?
I think because there's because the education system in itself is eliminating history generally from the curriculum, and we're not seeing the progress that the founder of Black History Month, which was almost 100 years ago, or over 100 years ago, had wanted to see, which was the idea that sort of African Americans would be integrated into the history and the sort of the story of America, so there wouldn't be a need for Black History Month because they would be part of American history and it wouldn't be up for debate. But we're living in a society where the racial separation and racial tensions are pretty bad. So yes, the education part is really, really important. So even if it's a little bit, it's better than nothing.
So if I hear you right, there will be a day, I think we all hope, I think that, well, we all should hope, I think. There will be a day when things are just so equitable that we won't need the month to reflect on the history, because the history
will be part of the
cumulative
general
history has evolved to a place of true equity.
And full inclusion. So we have a Women's History Month coming up, next month. So why isn't women's history, 50% of the population, part of American history anyway? So why is there a need for that? It's because, when we just think about how we teach and how we write about and what gets valued as history and as historical texts or what have you, tend to be white male. So having these opportunities and kind of forcing the issue to consider women or black folks or any other groups allows for sort of this is what America actually is. In an ideal world, you don't need any of these, but we don't live in that ideal world.
We'll come back to the situation at the State House last week, which is of interest, and then I want to just kind of check in on some of the national politics. Stay with us. I remind you of this flap at the State House.
I am not, I repeat, a house slave or a house.
Representative Anastasia Williams breaking her silence after making this heated, passionate speech at the State House. She's now naming the lawmaker she claims disrespected her, Representative Marcia Ranglin-Vassell.
That will be the last time.
This took place on the House floor after lawmakers met for hours considering a number of bills. Williams inferred a colleague disrespected her. At the time, she didn't say who.
Someone who I respect had the audacity, while they have the right to call whomever they want, what they want. I know who I am and whose I am. And that, being a house slave, I'm not.
On Tuesday night, Williams revealed for the first time she was talking about Ranglin-Vassell. And over the weekend, Ranglin-Vassell wrote a letter addressing the speech, stating she had no involvement in whatever made Williams go off. Plus, she says she would never use any type of derogatory words. Her letter included this: any claim that those words came from my mouth is patently false, and to even suggest that those words emitted from my mouth is meant to assassinate my character and integrity. I'm using my voice to shed light in this very dark moment. And that response is exactly what Williams says provoked her to name names.
And I do not sugarcoat my words.
In the new letter on Tuesday night, Williams directly named Ranglin-Vassell, stating in part, her comments, behavior, and denial of what she called me in the chamber is indicative of the conversations and division that will intentionally continue to harm, oppress, and keep the poor and community of color behind.
Man, this is a puzzle for me. I know that you're not a student of the State House specifically, and you're kind of being briefed with the story as you're seeing it. Do you have a gut take on this? I could ask you 20 questions, but...
Yeah, I mean, the phrase that comes to mind is a storm in the teacup, right? Of course the word shouldn't be used, and no one should use it, right? So that I totally understand, but I think, that there are more important things that need to be tackled on the floor of the House, and this is taking up too much time. Well, it's a she said, she said, and what's the resolution?
Well, what happened? What I've learned happened is that Marcia Ranglin-Vassell, the rep who's accused by Ms. Williams, called her a house slave, pss, that kind of thing, and it not on the microphone. Ms. Williams, Representative Williams, decided to take it to the microphone, which is its own kind of, I'm not sure I even understand what the tactic and the purpose of that was. The media attention to it can kind of create a circus atmosphere.
Exactly.
Which becomes kind of a caricature of itself. It's like, hey, look at these two black women fighting.
Exactly. It's a distraction from what needs to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
But are we at a place where a spat between two women who happen to be African American, who on the floor, shouldn't be aired?
Well, would a spat between two men be aired? And that's, you know, are they treating it, is the media treating it different because it's two black women as
I'm
opposed
not
to?
sure. Well, listen, she grabbed the microphone, she's on the floor, and she's seeking redress, and she's making speeches about who she is and what she's not on the floor of the State House. It is unavoidable. It's news. It's definitely news. I think one of the things that has prevented me from speaking at length about it on both forums that I have is because I don't really know what to say about it, other than I think your very practical response, you know, you're pretty nonplussed about the whole situation.
I guess I hear it too often on the daily, so.
Meaning what?
You know, folks talking to each, you know, I just think these women are probably very thick-skinned in order to get through politics and be where they are. So there's something else going on here that are beyond these words that weren't uttered in public.
So you always say something subtle that I think can create 10 new shows, because I don't necessarily think that's true. I don't think the politicians are necessarily thick-skinned in general. They actually, they profess thick-skinnedness, and they really don't have it. And that's got nothing to do with gender or color.
Even just to get through the process?
Yeah, but you know, it's situational. Anyway, you know, I just think that there is a level of drama that surrounds this that probably is not productive.
Definitely not productive.
But I think we got to be careful in how we receive it, in as much, I mean, it's just it's a case of conflict between two people.
Right.
That the N-word is part of it and the house slave thing is part of it. Is there a learning conversation that you want the public to have about house slave versus N-word? Do they mean the same thing? Da, da, da. Is that worth going into, is my question.
It's definitely a room for education, absolutely, because I'm pretty sure a lot of folks don't even know the reference, the house slave reference. But is this the place to be having that conversation because of all the work that needs to be done? Is this conversation part of any legislation that's happening? For me, it's like, you know, they're elected there to do a
minimum
job.
Wage. Wranglin Vassell didn't think Williams was being aggressive enough on the minimum wage. Williams wanted $1 because she could get it. She's more of the establishment Democrat. Wranglin Vassell is the person. Is it Vassell Wranglin or Wranglin Vassell? Wranglin Vassell. She wants 15 now. So she was more or less, my take is she was asserting that Anastasia Williams is part of the establishment
Right, she's sold
Democrats.
out. Yeah, she's not pushing hard enough.
So there comes the house slave thing.
Right.
House slave thing for Anastasia is the same thing as the N-word. And I think a lot of us are left going, okay, do we follow this or why?
Right.
So does somebody like you
I don't equate them.
Don't equate what?
The two words.
You don't?
No.
She did.
She did, but I don't equate them.
Yeah, so
they're different.
maybe at some juncture, I don't think it rose to this kind of, you know, statewide screaming match, but at some juncture, your expertise and historical perspective might be well served to be articulated not only to Ms. Williams, but to the legislature. You know, a seminar on what the hell happened here and why everybody ought to get their definition straight before we let the fire, you know, burn too hard. I don't know. Something more substantial when we come back. So, can I ask you about South Carolina?
Sure.
Isn't it interesting with you know, half a dozen white politicians seeking the office that securing the black vote in South Carolina is so crucial? It's almost, for Joe Biden for sure, it's the eye of the needle.
Right.
Reflection on that?
You know, they're all kind of miscalculating the black population as one thing. So
this monolithic treatment is. When is that ever going to go out of style?
That's why we need Black History Month, I guess, to kind of show
Give me a good 3 minutes on this. Go ahead.
Well, we need to show and demonstrate sort of the variety of blackness in this country. So it'll include someone like me, who's an immigrant, right, from another country, but also this country is big enough that there are situational and statewide differences in populations. So yes, you might win South Carolina, but that doesn't mean you're going to win New York or you're going to win California. Different people, different ideas, different politics, different histories in the politics, different folks running the state, and the issues are different. So, you know, the whole idea of primaries and electoral college is so anti-democratic anyway on so many levels, because it allows for it allows for certain pockets of people to have more power than others, depending on where they live. And so this becomes, you know, because South Carolina's primary is early, so their primary is worth more than ours, which is later, much later, right? It's after Super Tuesday.
Yes.
Super Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
So
we're in April.
At the end of April too. So, so what happens is, you know, no one's campaigning here, right? So so there's a way in which, you know, why is Iowa representative of anything, of anyone, given the demographics of Iowa?
All true, and that's a broader conversation.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you involved in an electoral college debate, because there's so many good arguments on both sides. But here's the thing. I think, again, what you're saying is this black vote success story that Joe Biden needs, that Bernie Sanders is impeding on, and the like, is
it's kind of a myth.
Thank you.
It's a myth. And
there happen to be a lot of people who happen to be black who live in South Carolina. You got to win South Carolina.
Right.
You know,
you have to win everywhere.
You know, do they eat, sleep, drink, and breathe the air differently than white people do? I don't think so. Yet there's some common ground political. Look, diversity doesn't mean denying differences.
Absolutely. It means celebrating all of them, I think. And I think this the denial.
Are you bothered by the idea there is no minority person contending for the Democratic nomination? Or is it just happened to come out that way and that's the way it is and whatever? I only got about a minute.
What I am interested in sort of even is how these candidates are treated and the bar that's set for each of them and how the bars are different for different people. So that part is a problem for sure. But for me, it's, you know, the actual electoral system is rigged for rich people. So who gets to be part of that is really stymied by how much money you can raise.
Rigged
and
for
that's a
people
problem.
on both sides of the aisle?
Both sides, yeah.
Okay, next time we have a political process conversation, we'll have you back. I don't think your expertise should be limited to black history, right?
I'm an Americanist, yeah.
There you go. It's a pleasure to have you as always.
Thank you.
Final word next. My guest tonight has a more important role in the public conversation, not just in the important conversation about racial justice and black history, but the political process in general. So we shall invite her again and again. When we reconvene tomorrow night, Bob Walsh of the National Education Association on some of this tax stuff and more. And Liz Beisel is joining us on Friday with her new book. Awesome. Talk to you. Bye.